The sun was high in the clear blue sky, casting its golden light across the wide stretch of beach that ran for miles along the coast. I adjusted the straps of my beach bag over my shoulder and glanced down at my 8-year-old son Mason, who was practically bouncing with excitement. His tousled brown hair caught the sunlight, and his bright green eyes sparkled with the kind of energy only a child could summon after a long drive to the ocean. "Come on, Mom," Mason called, sprinting ahead across the warm sand without waiting for me. I smiled, watching him kick off his flip-flops and dig his toes deep into the sand like he had to feel it immediately, like he had to connect with this special place we hadn't visited in months. We found a spot halfway between the dunes and the water, where the sand was firm but still soft enough for digging. I planted our large striped umbrella into the ground, set up our chairs and unpacked our cooler, carefully pulling out sandwiches, juice boxes, sunscreen and Mason's favorite snacks. He was already pulling out his pail and shovel, ready to start a project that would surely become the world's greatest sandcastle. Or so he believed, and I wasn't about to argue. After a thorough application of sunscreen, which Mason tolerated with exaggerated sighs and dramatic complaints, I finally released him to the mercy of the ocean. He dashed toward the waves, laughing wildly, and I followed at a slower pace, savoring the salt in the air and the rhythmic crash of the surf. We spent the next couple of hours building our sand masterpiece. Mason directed the operation like a tiny foreman, instructing me on turret size and moat depth, occasionally demolishing sections with gleeful abandon just to rebuild them better. Around us, the beach bustled with life. Families sprawled on colorful towels, kids tossed beach balls back and forth, and vendors pushed carts of cold drinks and ice cream. It was the perfect summer afternoon, warm and easy, with nothing more important on the agenda than having fun together. After a while, I leaned back on my elbows, letting the sun warm my face, while Mason wandered a little way down the beach, scanning the shoreline for seashells. I kept one eye on him, more out of habit than concern. Mason was independent but cautious, a trait I appreciated more every year he grew. It was then I noticed him slowing down, his attention drawn to something closer to the dunes where a small group of people had gathered. I shaded my eyes with my hand and sat up straighter, sensing something different in his body language. He wasn't just curious, he was focused. "Mason," I called out, but he didn't seem to hear me. Without hesitation, he jogged toward the gathering crowd. A flicker of worry nudged at me, and I quickly got to my feet, brushing the sand off my shorts as I hurried after him. As I got closer, I saw what had drawn his attention. A woman older, maybe in her late 70s, was struggling with a collapsed beach chair. Somehow, the metal frame had pinched her hand, and she was unable to free herself. A few people stood around her, murmuring uncertainly, but no one had stepped in yet. It was one of those uncomfortable moments where everyone recognized a problem but hesitated to act, unsure of what to do or fearing they might make it worse. Mason didn't hesitate for even a second. I watched, my heart pounding, as he knelt beside her, speaking softly. I couldn't hear his words over the hum of the beach, but I saw the kindness in his face and the way he carefully examined the chair. He worked at the stubborn mechanism, his small fingers surprisingly strong and patient. It took a few tries and I could see the effort it took, but finally the chair gave way and the woman's hand was free. She beamed at Mason, placing a grateful hand on his shoulder. They exchanged a few words, and then Mason helped her fold the chair properly and set it upright. The onlookers began to disperse, some offering brief smiles of approval before returning to their beach towels and conversations. By the time I reached them, the woman was seated comfortably again, and Mason was brushing sand off his knees, his face flushed with exertion and a little embarrassment at the attention. "Thank you so much," the woman said to me, her voice warm and full of emotion. "You have a remarkable son. Not many children or adults would have jumped in like that." I knelt beside Mason and ruffled his hair. "I'm proud of him every day," I said, my voice catching a little more than I intended. The woman smiled at Mason again. "You made a difference today, young man." "Thank you." Mason shrugged, looking shy but pleased. As we walked back to our spot, he didn't say much, but his hand slipped into mine, squeezing gently. Back at our beach umbrella, we sat together and ate sandwiches, the ocean breeze tugging at our napkins and carrying the smell of salt and sunscreen. Mason munched thoughtfully on his peanut butter and jelly, his feet swinging above the sand. "What made you go over there?" I asked after a while, not wanting to make too big a deal but needing to understand what had been going through his head. He shrugged again, taking another bite before answering. "She needed help," he said simply. "You always tell me if you see someone who needs help, and you can help them, you should." Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, hidden by my sunglasses. Sometimes as a parent, you wonder if anything you're trying to teach your child is sticking. You say things over and over, not knowing if they're really listening, really absorbing. And then, out of the blue, a moment like this happens, and you realize they've been listening all along. We spent the rest of the day playing in the waves, collecting seashells, and even chasing a few seagulls away from our snacks. Mason's laughter filled the air, and I found myself replaying that moment near the dunes over and over in my mind. It was such a small act on the surface, barely noticed by most of the people around us. But to me it meant everything. It showed me who Mason was becoming, a person who was kind, brave, and willing to step forward when others hung back. Later, as the sun began to sink low on the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, we packed up our things. Mason carried his bucket, now filled with shells, driftwood, and a smooth, heart-shaped stone he had found and insisted was lucky. Walking back to the car, he slipped his hand into mine again, just like he had when he was little. It was such a small gesture, but it hit me harder than I expected. He was growing up so fast, and while part of me mourned the passing of those early childhood years, a bigger part of me was excited to see the person he was becoming. As we drove home, Mason leaned his head against the window, watching the world go by, his eyelids heavy. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, my heart full to bursting. "Hey, Mom," he said sleepily. "Yeah, buddy. Today was awesome." I smiled, reaching over to squeeze his knee gently. "It really was." He drifted off to sleep, the soft sound of his breathing filling the car. And as I drove, I realized that while I had set out that morning to give Mason a perfect day at the beach, he had ended up giving me something even better. A memory that would stay with me forever. A reminder that sometimes the most unexpected moments are the ones that show you just how beautiful life really is. Even now, months later, I think back to that sunny afternoon.